This is Discourse Lab. I'm Anthony Rispo.
And I am Clayton Smith.
On this podcast, you'll hear a wide range of perspectives from an ideologically diverse suite of guests.
Our goal? To use conversation to analyze ideas, test arguments, and question dogmas. Now, let's head into the lab. All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Discourse Lab. Today we have another very special guest. They're all special guests, but this one is the special guest for today, and that is Mike Luso. Mike is part writer, part content creator, part journalist, and he is the host of News Theory on YouTube. News Theory is a video essay format show that brings to light the different narratives and biases that we see in the media. You might also have recently seen Mike in the last couple months on the Jubilee video titled, and this is a bit of a mouthful, One LGBTQ Plus Activist versus 25 Conservatives Feat Zander Moricz. I realize that that name is really hard to pronounce, and I certainly did that. I mispronounced it. But you get the gist. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on with us today, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Just living life out here in California. Beautiful weather out here, but yeah.
And you're in LA, right? Is that right?
Somewhere around LA.
Somewhere. Yeah, I'm not asking for your exact address, man. You're in SoCal.
So yeah. not everyone knows. It's like you say a city, and it's just easier to say LA, you know?
Yeah, I get that. I grew up in the DC metro area. I used to always tell people I'm just from DC because no one knows all the little towns and stuff around there. Super excited to have you on. Where should we start? Anthony, do you have a place, or Mike, do you have a place you're dying to dig into right away?
Why don't we start with Jubilee? I'm just going to get right into it. I have an observation and a question. It'll be posed as an observation that will lead to a question. I personally, I thought you did a beautiful job on that, which sparked my interest in getting in touch with you, and but just kind of we crossed paths on social media too, which was cool. But my experience watching that episode with the individual who was in the middle. I don't know if they have an official name for that, but
usually called the hero of the.
Oh, is that what it's called?
Yeah, the hero figure.
He's gay, and he doesn't identify with a bunch of different pronouns. He's just gay man. Is that what it was?
From what we know, he was a gay man. Yes.
Okay.
And a Christian, is that right?
Yes. He kept bringing up Christianity specifically.
So he brought up. Okay, I'd have to go back and just watch it again. But I will say, from my perspective, what I kind of got from that was a lot of just regurgitated, rehearsed talking points on the gender affirming care stuff from him. And I don't want to be too ruthless, and he's not here to defend himself, but we're here to talk about it anyway. So whatever. But I just found him to just regurgitate a lot of things that people often say that I just kept on nodding my head. Oh my God, what is he talking about? Because that's so not true. As per the evidence that we have. I mean, I'm kind of I wrote an article about this, about being gay myself and being castigated by the gay mafia, or the LGBTQ plus infinity mafia, for questioning the efficacy of gender affirming care and sort of ridiculing the ideological bent to it. So I'm curious, did you get that sense when you were talking to him that you're just hearing somebody regurgitate things that they just learned how to say? Or I don't know, did you come to it with a priori information about it?
So for context, the thing about Jubilee is that we don't know who we were gonna be debating. They say LGBT activists versus conservatives, whatever. So based on my understanding of what the news and political narrative of is when it comes to LGBTQ plus whatever stuff, that we're mainly going to be talking about gender studies and trans issues, because that is the dominating narrative when it comes to that, right? It's like no one's arguing, what a gay man can't do, right? Or a lesbian. Everything is on the T of the letter, right? The T letter.
Mm-hmm.
So going into it, and it wasn't just me, a lot of people kind of just understood that was what we were gonna talk about. So we had studies planned, studies in mind, just our talking points, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're debating anyone, you're all gonna have talking points and regurgitate stuff to some extent, right? I don't necessarily think that's the issue, but the vibe we got from him was that he was clearly an individual who was ingrained in the LGBT activist movement. He wasn't just some gay, right? He did a lot of work in Florida with the Florida book banning stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
With LGBT books. He was heavily involved in that stuff. So the vibe we got from him was this was an individual who, yes, was regurgitating all the talking points that you've heard, but he wasn't interested in any type of conversation, constant filibustering, constant monologuing.
Right.
It was almost as if in his head, he's probably like on some kind of like television show, right? YouTube. And he would like he wouldn't look at you. He would like turn his head and like look at the camera and start talking to the camera.
Right.
I did notice that. I don't watch a lot of these Jubilee videos, but it struck me as an interesting choice to kind of look right at the audience like that. I don't know if that happens.
Yeah, he kept doing that. And no matter what you said to him, he would keep saying the same. And he had four different prompts, right? But they were all basically the same thing because like you were saying, he's regurgitating things. And it kind of had like the NPC kind of meme thing.
Right.
And yeah, it was interesting because a lot of the Jubilee episodes are like that, where they bring in the hero and they all have their talking points. I would argue that the right, does it a lot better than the left. But even some of the ones on the right are like, I can't watch them. Right?
Yeah.
Lila Rose had one, right? She's a conservative Catholic. And she's debating progressives and liberals and leftists on, I think, abortion. And I was like, I couldn't get 5 minutes through it. It was just like, I can't watch this. Because it's like the same thing. It's like talking points, regurgitating. It's like NPCs are just all sitting in the seats talking. No one's having a discussion. It's just you're talking past each other. He did a lot of. He's probably the best gaslighter I've ever seen.
Well, that's exactly what was running through my head when I was watching. Yeah, it was amazing.
I do feel the need to interject here and just say briefly, Anthony, you touched on this a little bit at the beginning, which is he's not here to defend himself. And I will say in his defense and the defense of anyone who does that show, because he's not the first person. Like plenty of people sort of get a lot of shit, for lack of a better term, after going on that show as the hero. That's a really hard thing to do. I mean, I think we can all acknowledge, like, sitting in the middle of that room and having random people come up to you and throw these points at you. It does take a lot of preparation. And quite frankly, I have to say I have an issue with the format. I think, Mike, you're right to point out it's a lot of monologuing, a lot of kind of just basic talking points, because I don't think the format allows for much else. You're on a timer, you're getting different things. Like once this thing's done, then it's the next thing, and you don't know who you're going to talk to. You don't know what angle they're going to take. And so it's not conducive to like deep, nuanced, like, respectful even conversations. Everything has to be like super quick, super blah, 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 blah. So to be fair to him, not saying like, obviously I did disagree with a lot of what he said, but to be fair to him, it's a difficult position to be in. I'm not sure the format's my favorite.
Yeah. I would argue that the hero has it easier than the contestants. Left or right, because they are able to come in more prepared. They're the ones creating the prompts.
Yeah,
they're the ones kind of deciding. I mean, you guys are gonna get me in trouble because I'm sure it's like I've been avoiding making like a Jubilee kind of reaction video because I don't know necessarily how I want my relationship to be with them. I'm kind of like done doing videos with them.
Interesting.
Like they had one that just came out where it's like one black progressive versus 20 black conservatives. They asked me to be on that one. And I I basically said no. And the episode came out, and I'm like watching the trailer, and I was like, I'm so glad I said no. Like I'm because
it's
it's just nonsense. It's just people screaming at each other. And the most, I don't know, to me, mundane talking points intellectually. Things that you just, it's again, like we're back on the topic of the notion of regurgitating talking points. It's like, we're not saying anything. we're just like systematic racism, this, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, we're not actually talking about anything. We're not actually, and, you know, Anthony, I know, like, you know, me and you are similar in the sense where it's like, I'm a lot more philosophical in my thought process. So it's like, we could debate, sure, we could debate statistics and we can debate, you know, per capita and all that stuff, but it's like, there's like heart issues going on, right? There are like psychological, philosophical things going on that
absolutely.
Clay, like you mentioned, Jubilee does not foster that. Jubilee does not provide a space to have room for those type of conversations. It's just, I can literally cite you a study, which is what multiple people did with Zander, and Zander just says, nope, that's wrong. That's debunked. That was debunked.
Right.
And then leave no room to like have a conversation about what was in the study or what the study was even about or the efficacy of the study. It's like, nope, that was debunked, moved on, and then turn the camera, start filibustering. And it's like, what's happening, right? And if you look at some of the comments, and I've seen comments, and people will be like, why does everyone seem ill-informed? And my response to that is like, because everyone is ill-informed. and I don't know, I'm pretty sure I've signed like a bunch of NDAs with Jubilee at this point, but it's like, let's just say it's like the structure in which Jubilee sets up these debates they don't actually foster any like actual discussion. It's YouTube, right? You think about it, it's YouTube. It's rage bait. They find like the most asinine type of people. And I'm like, where, like there's one, the guy, if you saw the alt-right one, did you guys see that one?
Oh yes, with with what's his name? Who was the hero?
Mehdi Hassan.
Mehdi Hassan.
Yeah. Okay, I did watch
that
few short clips.
I'm like watching clips from this, and I'm like, why does this video exist? I'm like, why does this video exist? It's like all of them are just like, go back to your country, blah blah. I'm a Nazi, and like they're like saying, and like no one's actually debating. It's just like everyone's trying to say these most clickbaity stuff, and then you can tell it's like every single one is like a white male, like very specific archetype that runs into a very specific narrative, or fuels a very specific narrative in news and politics. And some people in the comments are like, where did they find these people? And it's like, again, it's like when you watch reality shows, right? When people talk about The Bachelor, Too Hot to Handle, stuff like that, and you watch these reality shows, and then it comes out later that it's like, oh, the producers made them say this, made them do this, or they edited the video. They cut the video up to make it seem like someone's a villain, right? But then like the when they do post interviews, they're like, we were actually cool with each other, but the way the producers made the episodes, that like we hated each other, but that wasn't the case. And they would like they're like, oh, you should go say this to this person. And they're like, do you want a Jubilee? The Surrounded it's a lot like a reality show, in that sense. And I think
then you have a Bell.
I do. It is more like, I mean, there's an analogy or a metaphor here, I guess, that's like, McDonald's is to food as Jubilee is to discourse, where it's like, it's high calorie, low nutrition, quick, quick to make, quick to eat, highly digestible, kind of addictive, but not a lot of substance, not a lot of like, you're not getting a lot of your vitamins and minerals and things like that out of the Jubilee videos. And I think what you said, Mike, was a great thing to call out. It's like the study. That's a really interesting conversation waiting to happen. Okay, you think the study's debunked. I think it's legit. Let's go into what part of the study you think disqualifies it. What is the problem with the methodology? What is the problem with the setup of the study? I mean, we just had a conversation. It will have, by the time this episode is out, the last episode we had will have been out for a week. And our guest was telling us then about like all of these problems with setting up research. If the fundamental question you start with is like flawed or makes an assumption it shouldn't make, then the whole thing's messed up. And we had this really interesting discussion about methodology, and you can't get that with a Jubilee video. You can't get that depth. You can't get that nuance. And yeah, it's like the fast food of discourse.
Well, yeah, and then the fast food part, I was saying that you have the bell that before you can even get hit with any introspection or cognitive dissonance that can be adaptive, where you're like, oh shoot, that point's interesting, let me dig into that a bit more. You get the bell that says you're done,
you get voted out or whatever and stuff like that,
and that's not conducive to a healthy dialogue at all. And
I mean, look at the most controversial episode was arguably the Jordan Peterson one. I feel bad as someone who's on the show. I feel bad because, or I give Jordan Peterson the benefit of the doubt, and a lot of people are like, well, you know, they're criticizing him for all sorts of things because the episode just didn't do well, performance wise. And I'm like, well, if you know what, if you've been on an episode and you know what I know, I'm like, it was totally Jubilee's fault. It wasn't Jordan Peterson's fault. You think Jordan Peterson would fly out all the way to LA to sit in front of a 18-year-old Redditor and debate the existence of God? You think that's what he like? Think of the people Jordan Peterson spends his time talking.
Right, exactly.
He doesn't have an issue talking to atheists or anyone. He'll talk to anyone. But who put an 18-year-old guy from Reddit in front of him? Like
that's such a good point.
Manufactured rage bait, right? And
absolutely,
that's how it was with it. I'm like I don't know, when my episodes, I'm like listening to some people speak and they didn't put them in the episode. There are some people who were so bad that even Jubilee was like, we can't use this. And I remember them vividly thinking like, what the heck is going on? And the reason why I guess my episode Zander, I got so passionate was because just some of the narratives that are being thrown out, specifically about Christianity. And I had no intention of talking about Christianity. That wasn't the purpose of the video. What's funny is that even if you look at the way Jubilee is like marketing the video, they just pretended that conversation didn't even exist. But I remember a couple contestants telling me, because I believe the reason why Zander kind of like chose me to do that last debate was because I was the only person who was like pretty calm, cool, collected. Like I wasn't yelling at them. I let you speak, you let me speak. So one guy told me his tactic is I just yell at them and my goal is to destroy them and blah 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 blah. And because some people are asking me like, how do you stay so calm? And I'm like, I just talk to them. Like I'm just I'm not here to rage bait. That's the difference. But like some people actually go because they want to make that clip. They want to do something. Even in the episode I did with Sam Cedar, right, where we're debating and I knew I didn't know something 100%, so I just like backed out myself. I was like, I voted myself out. I was like, I think someone else could like articulate this better than me, so I'm gonna like tap out. But that was after me and him had already gone like a good 2 minutes. So it wasn't like he stumped me. It was just like I made my point and I was like, I mean, I don't really have anything else much to say about this. I'm not trying to like get you angry or yell at you, so I'm gonna let the next person come in. And I did that because I know how social media works. I know it's like I don't want a clip of me looking like an idiot rolling around on social media, because all it takes is just one clip. And the guy after me, which is funny, is that what happened to him was what I didn't want to happen to me, where like he misspoke or he said something that was incorrect. But the reason why that happened is because he was trying so hard to like, debate. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, DEI is already in the Constitution. I can't state the exact wording to you because I don't have the Constitution memorized, but I think someone else we'll probably be able to do that. So I'm a tap out and let someone else come and talk to about the Constitution with you. And he's like, okay. And I left. And then the other guy tried quoting the Constitution. He messed up. And then that clip went viral. And I was like, dude, if you don't know, if you can't quote it, just don't do it. Like, you don't gotta
do it.
You don't gotta
and like you said, there's an asymmetry there, because Sam Seder had the opportunity to really prepare, I think, in a way that in a more targeted way than it sounds like the other participants.
We didn't know we were going to talk about DEI in that moment. Otherwise, I would have came prepared. Like I would have had the that specific point brought up, but Sam Seder got to like make up his prompts, and we didn't know what we were debating on until we got there. So it's like, hey, I'm not prepared. It's like I'm literally not prepared, and that was by design. So there's things I obviously know because, right, I'm in the space. I follow news and politics. I know generally what the talking point is, but I know people who are actual debaters who like live in the debate space. I don't know if you guys know anyone as well, but
yes,
they'll tell you in a proper debate space, they're like, if you're challenged to a debate, or if we say, hey, we're going to debate on this topic, they're like, I need 6 months. That's what they'll tell you. That's what they'll tell you. There's like, you can't just like start a debate and then come up next week and be like, hey, we're going to debate on, the deity of Christ. It's like, no, like professionally in the debate space, they see, I need 6 months because I need to go read your work. I need to go study and, read, watch, consume your work. I need to know what your points are. So that way, when I show up, I'm like able to respect your intellect. But Jubilee doesn't allow that.
And speaking of debating and the art of it, have you spent a lot of time thinking about that for yourself or doing that? Because we talk about, you just mentioned that debating takes so much more than, in just a few words you just said, it takes so much more than just a quick clip or a quick few seconds. Have you done some debating yourself apart from
not
YouTube?
Not on a macro level. And I think, like I mentioned before, I'm not the debater. I'm not the theologian. I'm not like, the academic. I'm more philosophical, where it's like, we can start talking about something. I don't really need to read the book or the study or whatever, but my brain works more where it's like it identifies parts of the subject that can be up for interpretation, and then we can start opining on that. That's how my brain works.
Got it.
I used to be a person where it's like I'll collect all sorts of books and different reads and stuff like that, and I was like, I'm not really reading them. I was like, I'm not really reading them. Like, but I like the idea of those subjects. And I mean, with news theory, it's like that's my outlet to kind of like, if I in an autistic sort of way latch onto some kind of topic, and I'm just super interested and I'm like deep diving into it, I'll do that. But generally speaking, like if it doesn't like spark my interest in that capacity, I'm not really reading like loads of books and like researching stuff. I'm more of like, I very much enjoy culture relevant topics. So it's like, I mean, obviously in just conversation in general, the aspect of debate is there, right? When you're talking to people, you're going back and forth, you have rebuttals, but I'm not, I don't know. I also think, I mean, this is another, maybe an aside or something, but it's like the whole desire and aggressive push that everything needs to be a debate is just too weird to me. It's like everyone's like, debate him, bro. And it's like, it's like WWE. It's to them. Like debate has become like some kind of like WWE thing. And it's like,
well, it is. I think you were talking about reality shows earlier, Mike, and I think that is a good comparison to make. I think a lot of debate, especially what we see online, is very much like about the drama and like, oh, who's gonna get one over on the other guy, and like also maybe just wanting like, I hate what that guy believes and I agree with this dude, so I want the satisfaction of seeing this other person embarrassed. It's very emotional. I think debate is highly overrated, at least in the kind of format that we're discussing, the Jubilee, the sort of online debate. I mean, it has a place. It's useful at times, obviously. But I think the issue is it's like one debate, even if one side thoroughly loses and the other side thoroughly wins, right? Like, it doesn't solve the issue. You have to have many debates many times over a long period of time, ideally before, you know, people start to get convinced, like in an ideal world, right? And I think something far better for opening people's minds, educating people, helping people come to a consensus, or just finding out where they disagree and where they agree, is just dialogue. It's discourse. I mean, it's like why we named this podcast Discourse Lab, is like part of the reason is I just think it's better to be curious, and you can disagree, you can argue, but from a standpoint of curiosity, not trying to win, right?
Yeah, and you know, actually, if you go to the root of it all, Socrates himself was extremely he was reluctant to even think that he knew half of what the person he was having a discussion with was like. He was reluctant to claim that he knew anything about the topic. He was always open to exploring it. He didn't think that debate should be a contest, rather than a contest, more of like a quest for truth and improvement. And I remember in one of my philosophy courses, I read Meno, Meno by Plato, and it's a dialogue between Socrates and Meno, who is this curious inquirer, younger person who is sort of, his interest is sort of piqued by Socrates as this wise, all-knowing person, but he sort of puts him to the test and kind of, I'm distilling this whole thing, but if anybody out there who's listening knows about this, it's kind of an amusing read, because the short of it is that the long and short of it is that at the end of the day, Socrates is like, I'm just old and ugly and I don't really know much, but you seem to know a lot, and so why don't you tell me what you think? And Meno can't really get around what he thinks, because he doesn't actually know what he thinks, and he's trying to pry Plato into getting Socrates, into getting him to give him the definitive answer, so the through line is, I don't know, and let's just talk about it. Give brief, direct answers to the question asked, and no long speeches like I'm doing right now, and be consistent and act in good faith. That was kind of the general idea of debate for someone like Socrates, and somehow we've become polemic and self-indulgent, and it's become too much of a sport. Sophistry is what it would be called in ancient Greece. But I want to segue into your show, because you are, like you say, you're philosophical, and you are, and I think that has led you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a curiosity, it seems, about the discourse that's happening right now in the world, and there's something about it that is off or interesting, even, maybe not just off. And I'm curious to know, like, what inspired you to start your show, News Theory, and could you tell us a little bit about what someone would expect by watching it?
Yeah, so I mean, the premise, and it's kind of evolved over and over and over to what it is now. I mean, even like my first videos and that I have up now, and then the next videos I have coming out soon, I've kind of evolved a lot differently, because it's like, sure, I could say I'm conservative, but I'm not trying to make videos for conservatives specifically, right? I'm trying to make videos that kind of like people who are more curious about why the news is the way the news is, right?
Right.
I was going to school for journalism in the height of the 2016 election, Trump's first presidency. Myself, alongside many others, very disillusioned with, traditional digital news media. And because of it, I chose not to go into that, and just did my own thing independently. But that, caused me to kind of like figure a lot of things out, right? Work-wise.
Right.
Also fell in love with YouTube and just the way you can kind of really go into storytelling. And I've had conversations with friends, and they're like, hey, like, I had a conversation with a friend, Will Roosh. Shout out to him. He's actually a really great guy. You guys should have him on on his podcast next.
Well, he's looking for guests. We'll check him out.
He's a teacher, educator out in LA. He's really big on critical thinking, and me and him were having a conversation on journalism. And I asked him, I was like, "What is journalism?" And he's like, "Journalism is conveying information." I was like, "No, not really." Simply conveying information doesn't make you a journalist. And he's like, "Well, what about Edward Snowden?" He's like, "That's a whistleblower." That doesn't make him a journalist. It makes him a whistleblower. Anyone can convey information. An 8th grader, your 5-year-old son, can go tell, his brother something. It doesn't make him a journalist, right? So it's kind of like taking like it's like the paradigm shift, right? It's like, how do we look at things, and how do we turn the cup to look at from a different angle? And a lot of times it's not what we're looking at, it's how we're looking at it. So that kind of became the core of like what every topic I want to look at. I want to look at it through the lens of like, why is the news talking about this in the way it is? So when I was talking to him, I said, my definition of journalism is narrative at the end of the day. That's what it is. If you know what a story beat is, if you look at what journalists in a newsroom, they're following story beats. They're following what is the narrative being spun right now. So if I brought up the topic of immigration, what would a typical news organization say about immigration as it relates to Trump? They would say things like, he's deporting citizens, which he's not. Citizens don't get deported. That's just not, it's just not a thing. The New York Times did like 2-month-old baby deported, right? Why did they say 2-month-old baby? Why didn't they say illegal alien who's a mother deported with her kids? Why didn't they say that? Why did they specifically in the headline lead with, 2-month-old baby American citizen deported? And I've told people that the sins that journalists tend to commit are sins of omission. It's not what they're saying, it's what they're not saying. And that is media spin. That's essentially what media spin is. That's what narrative is you're trying to paint a specific story, especially in the minds of your readers. So if your audience is predominantly conservative, then when you go to read, Daily Wire or Daily Caller, New York Post, or whatever, their narratives are going to be very like conservative. That's what they're going to do. And the same thing if you watch CNN, everything on CNN, like if you go on CNN's YouTube page, everything is like they did an interview with a individual named Doug Wilson. I don't know if you saw that. And they're asking him about Christian nationalism and how women should be treated in the home. It created a lot of buzz, obviously. And in the Christian space, a lot of people were debating on whether or not he was theologically correct and stuff like that. So some people, right, they see stuff like that and they're debating, was he theologically correct? Was he not? And, people who are in ministry are giving their opinions on his take. But from my perspective, I'm thinking, why does this interview even exist? I'm like, why, if you think about in the concept of Christianity as it relates to politics, why did CNN choose to do an interview on Christian nationalism? And why did they choose to interview this man specifically? Because there's so many Christians they could have interviewed, but they're choosing to interview him. And then you watch the interview and they put a woman in front of him, right? It's like,
it's designed.
It's all designed. It's a reality show. So,
and there was a connection between him and Pete Hegseth shouted him out, I think.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so there's that part of the constellation.
That's also part of the narrative.
Right.
They're trying to paint a picture because they don't even really dig deep into whatever that relationship is. Like, he has a relationship with him. What do you mean by that? He's met him a couple times. He's listened to his sermons and he's agreed with them. He's retweeted him. And so they're trying to paint, you can tell heavily they're trying to paint a picture because to liberal media, Pete Hegseth is a problem, right? He's a Christian. He has very traditional views. that's the antithesis to, what liberals, people on the left tend to not really vibe with. So let's interview a controversial, and this has nothing to do with Doug Wilson. I have friends who I've talked to about him, and I don't have any specific opinion on the man. You can agree or disagree on his takes on the home and traditionalism and how he interprets scripture. I'm not looking at the man. I'm looking at why the man is even there to begin with.
Right. Why him?
Yeah.
Why this conversation at all?
That's what I'm
Right.
looking at. And I think, and a lot of times my audience is, catered towards more and more towards Christians, because I do think Christians struggle with, interpreting and consuming media and having high media literacy rates, and having high media literacy. But that's what I'm looking at. I'm like, why is he there? Like, what is CNN trying to tell me? It's the same thing with the Sydney Sweeney ad. It's like
Right.
Sydney Sweeney ad's only goal was to grab your attention. But you have people,
okay, and to be fair to that, that's their job. That's different. That's advertising.
Yeah, that's advertising.
That's where it's like fair game.
Every product,
Right.
whatever brand they're putting, their job is to get your attention. It's not necessarily to tell a message. Like, even if I think Bud Light did like a very family oriented ad, post the Dylan Mulvaney thing, and like a lot of conservatives like, wow, this is a great ad. Ads are coming back, blah blah. It's like, their goal isn't
subpar beer.
Yeah,
like, why?
their goal isn't. It's like left and right, right? The right could see an ad that agrees with their traditional values, and the left can see an ad that agrees with their progressive values. But the brand isn't there to affirm traditionalism or progressivism. Their goal is to get your attention. So
It's
when
to
you
sell beer.
Sell beer. So when you consume the ad and you say, "Wow, that was a really great ad. They had a family and the mother and the babe and the baby, so traditional. I love it." That wasn't the goal of the ad. The goal of the ad wasn't to promote traditionalism or family. The goal of the ad was to get your attention, and it did that. So I feel like people don't consider that when they consume news. They just kind of consume whatever is in front of them without taking the time to like really think. It's like, why is this in my face right now? Like, why am I being shown this? It's kind of like the meme where it's like, everything I learned about X is against my will, right? Like the Kardashians. Like, every time I learn about the Kardashians is against my will. It's like, why do I keep being told this? So
Right.
journalism is narrative, and there are specific narratives that aren't from the heads of everyday Americans. They're narratives that were manufactured by the media. And not to go, I'm using Christian nationalism just as an example, not necessarily to go into the debate of Christian nationalism, whether it's prevalent or not, but Christian nationalism is a very hard left-wing progressive narrative that was manufactured. And it's designed to tell you that Christians want to do some kind of crusade and just like destroy gay people, destroy people who aren't right. And it's a very specific narrative that's meant to scare people. That's meant to it's rage bait. Now there are people who do have very specific views, right? But to paint a narrative that they're like, this is everyone. This is like your
This
Christian across
pervasive.
your Christian neighbor is thinking this, and they're not. They're not thinking. I guarantee you, it's like most Christians don't even vote, which is funny. So it's like they're telling you
that is actually incredible to me.
Yeah, they're telling you that Christian nationalism, that's the narrative, is on the rise, and they want to dominate and take over the government and establish a Christian nation. But you look at the data, and most Christians don't even participate in politics. So what is it, right? You look at the data, Christians don't even participate. The Christians that do participate is a very small percentage. The Christians that don't, like if every Christian majority wise voted, they're like Democrats would have like no chance. Like,
yeah, that's very true.
Right?
That's very true.
But they're painting so again, kind of, beating the notion down, but it's like journalism is narrative. The media interviews a man to tell you that Christian nationalism is on the rise and this is what they're doing. But you look at the data and Christians don't even vote.
And I will say, by the way, I think both parties are guilty. And I mean, by both parties, I mean the news organizations, be they left or right, and the people that they invite on, right? Because if they invite on some Christian nationalists, like super, like traditional, bordering on radical Christian person onto their show, they're guilty of having someone on who's doesn't really represent the vast majority of Christians. And that guy is guilty of, at the very least, implying that he represents more people than he actually does, that his viewpoints are shared by a broader swath of the Christian population than they actually are.
Yeah, and it's difficult. It is difficult because kind of like the Jubilee, where it doesn't actually foster that room to have those philosophical debates, is because, and this is especially when you bring up scripture. That's why I hate it. Like when people bring up the Bible and politics, it's like most of the time when people debate theology, it's not that what Doug Wilson is saying is unbiblical. It's that the interpretation, it's sorry, something is in my eye.
That's all
I have
good.
long eyelashes, so like sometimes it just curls into my eye and pokes me in my eyeball.
Wake up call.
But the tricky thing, and this is where it's muddy, is because I could listen to Doug Wilson, and I listen to some of it, and I'm like, what he's saying is not necessarily not true. But how he's framing it is where the disagreement comes with some people. And it's also, again, like the philosophical aspect of like why, like the narrative, right?
Right.
Because the woman doing the interview is obviously guiding. She's trying to the way she's asking him questions, right, is she's guiding to fit a specific narrative. So
they're leading questions.
Yeah, they're
motivated reasoning too.
They're leading questions, and also the way they edit it and stuff like that. So even if Doug Wilson is saying something that's like technically true, it's being framed in a narrative that can be negative, right? And I'm actually surprised he even did the interview, honestly. I'm like, why would you? You have your own platform that you could just like say this in the way that you want to say it, but you went on CNN and allowed CNN to like do it in a, I don't know. And then also, like I was saying, why him? Because like there's so many people you could talk to about traditionalism and family and stuff like that. And like, why not Charlie Kirk? Why hasn't CNN brought Charlie Kirk in to talk? He's very traditional. He's very family, right? Why didn't you have him come in and have that discussion? Why Doug
and
Wilson?
Arguably better conversational, better at actually debating, if you want to say that, or just having conversations. I think he was at Oxford recently. But did you see actually just a quick? Yeah, he's really good. Did you see recently the left wing or CNN? I can't remember who reported it, but this like all white like enclave, like
like, was it, so there's the one in Arkansas.
Yeah,
I think
as if these never existed, and they're just, I don't know, as if you know what I mean. It's like they're overpronouncing.
Well, hey, I will say that's stupid. I do think that's stupid, and I don't like. I get wanting to be away from like certain types of people in terms of how they act, but like, there's plenty of people who aren't white who are great neighbors, and I just think, it's terrible.
But that seems to fit the narrative that we're talking about too. Just like overpronouncing things that are likely not happening.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like the Democrats. If you look at Democrats specifically and why they have such a low approval rating right now, it's like it's not cool to be a Democrat. It's because they allowed a very small sect of their voting populace to have the majority vote, majority voice, right? So you have people who, right, very progressive, let's say alt-left, right, in contrast to alt-right, whatever you want to name it. And they said, okay, when it comes to gender ideology, this is what everyone believes. Everyone believes this, when in reality it's not, right? I think they did the poll on the Sydney Sweeney ad, and it's like only 12% of Americans like disapproved of it. But the media would tell you, it's like, oh, Mike, all of America is mad about this. It's like, no, all of America is not mad about it. So they do this with left and right ideologies. where they say, well, when it comes to trans identity and trans ideology, this is what all of Democrats believe. This is what all on the left believe. And when I was in New York, I don't know if you saw that video I did where it's like New Yorkers explain why Democrats are losing.
Mm-hmm.
These were NYU students. These are like progressives. And they were all telling me that Kamala and the Democrats leaned way too much into the specifically gender, trans, abortion. These are people who they're not pro-life, they're not conservative, and they're like, yeah, they went too hard. Like that's all they talked about. And this one Black girl, she's telling me how she disagrees with them on immigration, right? And she's at NYU, right? NYU person of color, and she's saying, yeah, they went too far on immigration. So it's funny. So now Trump's elected, right? And if you go on CNN, every time they talk about immigration, they're all talking about how Trump's going too far. Trump's going too far. That's the narrative. Trump is going too far. But they never mentioned Biden going too far. The only time immigration has ever gone too far, that narrative, is when Trump was president. They've never said Obama was going too far. They never said Clinton was going too far. They never said Bush was going too far. They never said Biden was going too far, even though he was going the other way of too far. That narrative was never brought, right? The most we got was deporter in chief, but it wasn't even like a negative thing for Obama, right?
Right.
If you look historically of how every president, Democrat and Republican, has handled immigration wasn't really like a debatable thing. It wasn't like you had a Democrat presidential candidate and a Republican candidate and they're arguing on how immigration, that wasn't a thing. Democrats and Republicans, for the most part, pretty much agreed on a lot of immigration tactics. Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, Obama, all saying, you go to the back of the line, you learn English, you assimilate. Kamala Harris telling was of Venezuelans, do not come. Like Hillary Clinton, like, you need to learn English, you will assimilate. Obama said the same thing, you will assimilate. You can't cut the line. You will come here legally. Deported so many people. There was never a narrative of they're going too far. It wasn't until 2013 or 14, whatever, when Donald Trump says literally the same thing that Obama was saying about immigration. And then it became racist to say that. And then it became too far. So what happened? So that's why when like the concept of news theory is like we got to have some sort of media literacy and understand that journalism is narrative. Human beings have motives. And why is this news outlet specifically pushing this narrative? Why is it that this, for decades, was not evil to do? And for some reason, in the last 5 to 7 years, immigration is evil all of a sudden. What happened there? And why?
Or you should say immigration enforcement is evil.
Yes, immigration enforcement is evil, right? And again, like back to Biden's presidency, like I had to correct my conservative friends that Biden was not for defund the police. He wasn't. That was a progressive talking point. Biden himself, and sometimes you'll hear Trump saying, like, I don't think it was Biden. I think it was people around him. It's like, yeah, that's how we know. That's why the whole like why people think like Biden wasn't running things, because Biden was not progressive. He would like
he was being run.
Yeah,
he was being run.
It was almost
I don't know if you guys noticed.
I
don't know if you guys noticed this. Maybe it was just me, but I think his brain was starting to go a little bit towards the end there. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy.
I think he was just checked out. I think mentally,
let me check.
Checked out. I think it was more of a mental thing, not in the sense of like cognitive decline. I think there was just so much happening, especially with COVID. I think. And this is, I don't know, there's probably like human psychology to this. I think mentally he just was kind of checked out.
I think he's neurodegenerative on a neurodegenerative
I mean,
path.
there's obviously the old age thing. I'm not saying the old age things happen, but he's not retarded. Like
Yeah,
there are people who are like
Well,
making
no.
it seem as like he's like degenerative, like retarded state. I don't
Yeah, I
think
know what
that's
you
what was
mean.
happening. I do think it's like, you quit your job, you have 2 weeks left. You check
Well, we
down.
know
I don't know. I
interesting
do think his cognitive decline. I mean, we should acknowledge that none of us are like medical experts on cognitive decline, but I will say it looked a lot what I've it looked a lot like what I saw with my own grandparents in terms of like,
Yes.
oh, he's not quite there.
Mhm.
It was so familiar to me. So, I mean, that's the best I can do as a layman, but it's
Well,
and then you have people talking about it now. I mean, you had the book that I think Jake Tapper and a co-author
right.
whose name escapes me just came out with, and it seems pretty clear that there was some amount of cognitive decline, which is totally normal for a guy his age, by the way, was going on. But I do think you bring up an interesting point, Mike, that part of that may well have been, hey, I'm old as heck and I'm on my way out, and but then again, he was running for re-election, so I don't know, because.
Well,
I mean, wouldn't he have just been like, because he was supposed to be a quote unquote transitional president, and then he ran for he was trying to run for re-election.
But I just want to make one quick point about the neurocognitive part. Yeah, I'm not a doctor either or a neuroscientist, but we did have a neuroscientist professor at Columbia HXA.
Yeah, yes,
right,
yes.
Who
I remember this conversation.
Who she herself did not make a diagnosis, but because she is a neuroscientist and understands this stuff, she said that age is not really it. You have to have predispositions for that kind of thing, and she noticed that just because somebody gets old doesn't mean that's what happened to Biden is going to happen to them per se. That you have to have something in terms of predispositions there meets stress and other factors, and to her professional eye, it looked a lot like neurodegeneration. I know this is not the point of the show, but I'm just saying for the audience, like that's so I mean, but to that point though, if it is medical and we're finding out a little bit more that under the table people knew about it, then that's another narrative spin that was driven by the progressive left in desperation.
So like I was saying, the sins of journalists are typically sins of omission, and that's basically what Original Sin, the Jake Tapper book, and I think the guy's Alex Thompson, that's what they're kind of talking about, and they made it a point to kind of mention it's like there are some liberal pundits and journalists who are saying it's not that they were covering for Biden, but that it was that they were so trusting of the Democratic White House that they just took whatever was being sold to them. But it doesn't make it better. Like it's not that phrase, that narrative that they're putting out is not necessarily better or worse. Like it's still bad, right? It's still just as bad as it's a inadvertent way of covering up, right? You're still covering up because your bias and your commitment to a narrative basically did the act of covering up. So like your intention wasn't to cover up, but you were committing the act of covering up because they were they were so committed to these narratives because
we were noticing it. We all, many of us noticed it. And how could you, like, if you're a true journalist, like really in it for the truth or actually trying to get to the bottom of things, like why would you why would you commit the sin of omission? Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, it's negligence, right? Because your job as a journalist is to dig deeper, be skeptical, be curious. Like the idea that a journalist would trust any government official 100% completely, even if they're on a party that they tend to in a party I should say that they tend to vote for or whatever, they view them as politically aligned with them. It's just absurd to me that you'd be like, okay, yeah, that's the story, got it. And you would have to have ignored so much. It's gross negligence. I'm willing to believe that it was not intentional because I think people really drink Kool-Aid, so to speak, a lot of the time.
Well, it was intentional in the sense that, I mean, the reason why I use the phrase sins of omission is because in Christianity, there's the concept of it's funny because the book's called Original Sin, right? It's like if we all have a sinful nature, sins aren't just like things you just outright commit. Like if I just go murder someone, it could also be, it's like, I mean, you look in the concept of, I'll use Spider-Man as an example. Why was Peter Parker so distraught over the death of Uncle Ben? It's because he didn't act, which caused the death of his uncle. That was a sin of omission. But that is the theology in Christianity where it's like you committing to not do something is often just as bad. Like, you didn't pull the trigger, but you allowed things to happen. And when we look at the concept or the the Biden administration, a lot of journalists, just like you were saying, took the Kool-Aid and they didn't ask questions like, how is Biden doing cognitively? And they say, oh, he's fine. And they're just like, okay. And it's like, what do you mean, okay? You're a journalist. Ask questions. Like, don't just be like, well, they said he's fine, right? And it's like, you're like the meme of the dog in the burning home, and it's like everything is fine. And
Yeah,
it's like,
this is
because
fine.
someone told you it's fine. Like, what do you mean? Like, and I don't know. I have a video idea of doing like basically kind of like the fall of journalism, modern journalism, because if you think of great feats within journalism, you think of like when the New York Times uncovered the sex abuse in the Catholic Church all those years ago. If you've seen that movie,
I think that was the Boston Globe, actually. It was if you've ever seen Spotlight, at least that's where I'm getting it from. It was the Boston Globe, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Definitely Boston. Those accents are definitely Boston.
You watch that movie of Mark Ruffalo, Spotlight, and it's like,
right.
It's like, when was the last time we've had journalism like that? I don't remember. I don't know a time of recent history of journalists really uncovering stuff. I mean, even if you look at the stuff of like the Epstein files, right? And I think there's a woman, I can't remember. It was like, I can't remember what outlet was, but she was mad because she like did work and like wanted to break the story. And the outlet told her, no, like, don't talk about it. And then years later, it like broke. And she was like mad because she was like, I had the story. Like, I did the work and I had the story. We interviewed people. And you see this shift of like journalism where it's like, it's not about uncovering and breaking stuff anymore. It's about peddling narratives. It's about pushing agendas. And journalism has, in a lot of ways, fallen because of that. And we see that in other institutions. Like, education is struggling because of activism, right? A lot of politics is struggling because of activism. Different areas, social, economic areas, are struggling because of activism, not because people trying to like uncover truth, or they care about kids, or they care about, the economy or whatever. It's just activists like dominating different aspects of our cultures and saying, well, we're upset about this, so we're going to Karen our way into like changing policy because of like some small group. And it's just changed. So journalism has essentially become that, where it's just a bunch of activists who are peddling narratives instead of saying, well, now, like, again, like on the topic of like, sexual abuse, the narrative is that the dominating avenue of kids being, diddled is in churches, which factually isn't true. Do you guys know what the number one space that kids are sexually assaulted?
Would
Probably
it be the home and the family?
No, it's school teachers. Female school teachers. Female school teachers are the highest proponent of sexually assaulting children at
female school teachers,
exponential rates.
Where I would say, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to like pin you down on this or get a gotcha, but I am curious, like, where are you getting that information? Because it's not something I've looked into, and my assumption would be, it would be men, right? That were the primary perpetrators. Now it is just occurring to me that probably part of the reason it is female school teachers, if that is in fact the case, is because so many more teachers, especially of that younger age, that elementary age, are female. So that probably has something to do with it. But where you expand on that to the extent that you can. This is news to me.
Yeah, I mean, I would need to pull the specific study.
I'm sorry. I kind of put you on the spot. I didn't.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Provide it. We can if you have it.
Again, this isn't something where it's like I have like the data right in front of me, and there obviously is some kind of. All I'm saying is that I'm not saying sexual assault doesn't happen in churches. I think I just read a story of like there's about to be some kind of bombshell in a Catholic church somewhere.
Shocker.
It happens. I'm saying the narrative is that and this is what you'll see LGBT activists say. This is like, they're like, they'll say, as far as like protecting kids, right? They'll say like, drag queen story hour isn't an issue. And Zander kind of tried to do this. Zander tried to do this in our debate. He's like, the issue isn't drag queens and gay people adopting whatever. The problem is, and this is when he started bringing up Christianity. He's like, the problem is churches. Like, he started bringing up Christians for some reason. And like, he was trying to like, it's like, because school shootings happen and because church clergy have sexually assaulted kids, that is an issue. So don't look at any of the issues that are happening in the LGBT community. So it's like saying, because guns exist, don't talk about knives. And it's like, that's not an argument, right? We can
do both.
Yeah, we can say, hey, all sexual assault is wrong, but we shouldn't create systems that allow sexual assault to just like exist and be prominent, right? So when you have situations like you're saying, Clay, it's like most teachers, educators are female, right? And it's a lot easier to get a young hormonal boy to have sex with you, right?
Yeah.
So it's also like the classification of rape, right? It's like when people think rape, they just think, male
perpetrator, female victim,
Catholic priest, and young boys. Or adult male, adult woman, like that. So again, it's like the framing of the narrative, like what is rape, right? But and I think this statutory rape, like that's the correct term of, like, even if that young boy like willingly wanted to do it, it's still a crime because he's a minor. So
yes.
so it's like you watch I watch a lot of the SVU Law and Order on Snapchat, right? I watch all the clips, and a lot of the SVU episodes are about statutory rape. It's like, just because like, it's like, even if they wanted to do it, it does, like, you're a minor, you are most likely manipulated in some way, right? And SVU does a really good job of like displaying that, specifically because a lot of times it's minor male and adult woman. And that's where that situation arises. So, I can look more and like find.
No, it's fine. We got off topic because I found that stat so shocking. Like, I could have, I've heard interesting and horrifying and shocking things about sexual assault stats. I think the most mortifying one I've heard is that like the number one predictor by a huge margin of sexual abuse in the home is not alcoholism, not that the parents were sexually abused. It's just having a step parent in the house.
Yes, that is
you hear
true.
Something like that and you're immediately like, okay, I want to know everything about that. That is terrifying and I need to know. But I did kind of put you in a corner there. I didn't mean to do that.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah.
And it's not the fact that like it's not that those instances of sexual assault don't happen in different areas. It's just like, it's the point is the narrative, right? That is pushed, right? It's like, if you're going to be concerned about kids and sexual abuse and protecting them, look at Christians, look at what they're doing. But you never hear any sort of narrative. It's like, well, look at teachers, look at like, why aren't we look at educators and what's going on there?
We'll say I do think there is some amount of interest in that. I feel like I do see frequently a news story of like, 25-year-old teacher has sex with 15-year-old freshman student, like, because that is, I think the reason I think you see that a lot is kind of for icky reasons, in the sense that it is just so captivating, right? And it's so, and it brings up this really gross argument. Oftentimes it's like, where was that teacher when I was 16 kind of thing. And so you get in this argument of how damaging is it and whatnot. And it's, but yeah.
So I just want to say,
like right-leaning outlets that'll do it. Because again, media, it's just a battle of narratives. So it's like the left will have their narratives in the media and the right will have their, and they're just like it's like a snowball fight, going back and forth, trying to like do some kind of like Thanos level balance. It's like, well, the left only talks about this, so we got to balance it out and only talk about this. And it's like, but you're doing the same, narrative scheming that is not, at the end of the day, you're both not helping, right?
That's right. So I looked up the Bureau of Justice statistics. So sexual assault is overwhelmingly perpetrated by men, typically known to the victim. But that doesn't kind of whittle away at the specificity that you're talking about, which I have heard that statistic about female school teachers. But there is one thing that does raise my ear a bit. Well, is that even possible? If I were a dog, perhaps raise my brow, my eyebrow a little bit. And I would love to know what you think about this. And it probably goes along the lines of what we've been talking about, narrative. But, I am gay, and I really don't wear that. I think I've mentioned it a few times on the show in context based on talking about issues. And I don't, knock on wood, I really have had a pretty easy time in my skin, and I have a very accepting family. I come from a very accepting environment regionally. I was teased when I was a kid, who wasn't, and I'm not making light of that, but all things to say that I don't feel the need to wear identity on my sleeve. I've never been an identitarian per se, but one thing that has been arising, I think, is there's this narrative that is being put out there that LGBT or gay men who adopt children are likely to are pedophiles. And this is a spin probably by a very fringe group of people, but it is making some waves, and I don't like that, because to the point of evidence, there is no evidence for that. It's conjecture. Though I will say I'm not closing the door. I'm never closing the door to the possibility that could be potentially the case, because I don't think they collect sexual orientation data on sexual orientation. So I'm willing to put that forth as some kind of testable hypothesis or question. But the fact that it's just this, there's no daylight between that accusation and what people come to think, and it just kind of like validates their priors or their confirmation bias. It's just a bunch of confirmation bias really about gay people. Now, let me just caveat with, personally, and maybe listeners will think this is kind of crazy for him to say, maybe not, but I actually have very controversial views about gay couples adopting children. I have very controversial views about surrogacy, like about giving your child away. And I have friends who had 2 women for parents, 2 men for parents, and the data don't show that there's much, really any harm in comparison done to that child. If you were to compare it to a child in, quote, a broken home or an abusive household, you actually see the effect of being in a same-sex household advantageous and adaptive for the child on an emotional level. Of course, there's nuance, but all that's to say, and like I like to go down all these different rabbit holes because I think it's important to caveat and to add context. I'm curious to know what you think about this issue arising, this talking point, especially on the right, that, this idea that, gay parents or gay men who have children are just pedophiles. Or is this just a very fringe narrative spin? And then to add to that, there's also, and CNN posted this, and I actually looked into it and I didn't find any evidence that it's on the rise, but conversion therapy is also another thing that's being talked about a bit, that it's back on the rise. And again, I say I saw it on CNN and I didn't see any evidence outside of that it actually was. So I'm wondering if you've heard about these different topics and maybe what you think about them too. I'm not going to be offended. You could say anything you'd like. So that's a lot to throw out.
I will be, Mike, so be really careful.
Yeah. No, you're good.
I am fragile.
I mean, I think I understand what you're saying, what you're asking. I mean, and again, like I look at everything through the frame of like the narrative, right? I do think it's important to understand and identify online chatter from like actual reality, right? So it's like the comment section of an Instagram post is not real life. It's just a collective of people who really like to, rage bait and say certain things, stuff like that. Like there's a reason why Instagram is joked around. It's like, it's the racism app. Like that's what people talk about. Like people think X is racist. And like, I've had people like, oh, I don't make an X account because there's too much racism going on. I'm like, but you have an Instagram account. What are you talking about?
So poison.
I try to do my best to kind of like first mentally process that, right? It's like, that's why people say like get off social media. Another thing is I don't think so I'm just saying from my perspective, I think the conversations and that chatter stems from again, when we're talking about how like activists and a small percentage of a group population overtake narratives and make people think like this is what everyone believes and this is what everyone's doing, when in reality that's not necessarily the case. I don't think it's that gay men, let's say gay men specifically, are going around trying to like diddle kids. I think what's happening is that you have sexual predators who are exploiting the adoption system to adopt kids, and they're exploiting it because you have states that don't require, like, there are states who, like, if you are a sexual predator, like, you're just on a list and you know you like you're not adopting any kids, you're not getting through any kids. But there was a story I read of like two men, and one of them is a sexual predator, but they moved to a different state that didn't look at it, and guess what state it was? It was a blue state, right? So you have these policies, and you have bad actors, and this bad actors on both sides, right? But you have, like, there's one California congressman who's like consistently pushing for like things that like make people like, why are you trying to protect pedophiles? Like, I don't understand. Like, oh, you don't have to register as a sexual predator to adopt anymore. It's like, why make that law? Like, why make it a point to like do that, right? And it's happening in blue states. And then what happens? You have people who go and exploit those systems so they can adopt, so they can do this. Because again, there are and this, regardless of whether your stance is on gay marriage and gay parenting and stuff like that, there are so many gay people who just aren't online, who just aren't, right? They're not participating in like the activism of LGBT stuff, and they have kids, they've adopted, they're right. I think the quote or the term now is like the normal gays, right? That's going around.
Yeah.
And so you have them who aren't, they're not actively like voice. So it's the same. And I think that's in like every demographic, right? Like I was saying before, Christians predominantly don't vote, and they're silent, right? So what happens is you leave the Christians who are vocal and who do vote. And that typically leaves, and that typically are fringe groups of that major group, if that makes sense. So that's in every single demographic, whether it's black, white, gay, straight, Christian, atheist, whatever. But typically majority of people like don't participate, and then that just leaves the fringe sides of each of those demographics who are like leading conversations. So and then what also doesn't help is that Democrats tend to do this thing where they will never vocally, publicly, and they will never vocally disagree with other liberals publicly. Like, they just won't. Gavin Newsom's starting to do it, and it's like freaking people out because like they refuse to, like, right? I think one critique, I can't remember who I was watching. They're like, Bernie's great, but he refuses to like disagree with anyone. Like, you asked
Fetterman too. Fetterman from Pennsylvania. Fetterman, John, yeah,
he's
from
like disagreed on stuff. Like Fetterman, like he's gotten some brownie points on the right because he will like actively say, "Hey, I disagree with this." But Bernie will go on Joe Rogan's podcast and will just refuse to like denounce or disagree with anyone. Like he's always like, the working class Americans, blah blah blah. Like, and like he has his talking points. It's like, dude, like, you don't agree. And then here comes Gavin Newsom saying, "Hey, boys and girls sports was kind of, it was kind of bad." And then the headlines are like, Newsom disagrees or
transphobe.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Because Democrats don't do that. So it makes things a lot more complicated when you look at things. And again, media narrative and narratives people want to push, even if they are true, even if the things that they are like saying are necessarily true, right? Like I was saying with like the Doug Wilson thing, it's like it's not that he was saying things that aren't necessarily unbiblical. It's just like the framework and the narrative that's and the CNN has the reins to cut it up how they want and push it and pedal it how they want. That's where like the difficulty in consuming that media comes from the audience. So is it a fact that there are sexual predators abusing the adoption system? Yes. Right? Does that mean that straight people aren't sexually abusing kids? No. It just it's the same thing where it's like are black people have black people abused the EBT system? Yes, that's factually true. Right? Does that mean that white people don't do it? No, it doesn't mean that white people don't do it. It just means that like
frequency.
Right. Yeah. So
Right.
So that's where kind of like when we're talking before about like, you know, leaving room for that nuance of like actually breaking down even on a philosophical level what we're looking at and what we're seeing, right? Which typically, like we established, right, Jubilee doesn't leave room for that. Most political discussions don't leave room for that. So is that narrative being more and more pushed online? Yeah, absolutely. Is the narrative being pushed and talked about in a way that's productive and helpful? Probably not. But that also doesn't mean that it's what's being said isn't happening.
That's a very good way of putting it, and for framing it as happening online, which is a different beast, but also putting into the frame the aperture, looking at it from that lens of that it is something that we don't talk about, and it's if you've been following Janine Pirro, she's a riot. I love watching her clips. Oh my god! But it's the same thing with raising the age on crime for young kids. Like they keep on raising the age from 16 to 18, and these kids don't get the adult sentencing. And she found that this has been a huge issue in the black community in DC. All these black children, I think she talked about it on her last thing. I think it was a Fox News interview, that actually the people that the left claims to care about end up suffering more at the hands of these policies that whitewash the truth. I mean, raising the age, that's a narrative we don't hear about. That we hear the inversion of that we have to lower, we have to make sure we don't punish young kids so that they can have a chance. But have you been following her actually, Janine Pirro?
No, not specifically.
Mike?
I'm wondering when you say raising the age, what do you mean by that?
So a criminal offense, like a kid could shoot another adolescent. An adolescent can shoot another adolescent, and they won't get nearly as much of a sentence as if they were an adult. And they raise the age of an adult, so they don't get an adult sentence in New York City, actually, because they have raised the age to, I think it is 18 years old, for them to be viable for that kind of a sentence. So if you're 14 and you kill someone, it's just, she put it as you go to the ice cream parlor and you do all these games and stuff. But that's a narrative that has been under the has been under the bed. It's not been something that we have said. It's not something I knew about. And you have people like her who are coming into the fore and showing us that, this has been going on, and this is actually hurting the people that it claims to help.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That it's. I mean, I feel like that issue in particular is one that is deserving of its own episode entirely, right? Because when you're talking about putting, sentencing a 25-year-old versus a 14-year-old to prison time, or that gets fuzzy, because I do think we should have a lot more leniency when it comes to, as a general rule, right? With
not
lots
according
of nuance
to her,
to younger people, to children, right? A 14-year child, right? So it is complicated, but I do. We've been going for an hour and 20 minutes now, just about. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, Mike. And it's been an interesting conversation. There is one last thing I really wanted to get to, which is
real quick, because I know I answered the first part of your question, Anthony. I don't know what was the second part?
Boy, what was the second part of the question? Well, you mean the question about the question about pedophilia? Like, was
Well,
that what we?
I feel like there were, because you kind of asked two questions. It was kind of like two topics. The one
Yeah.
about the narratives of, gay
Oh,
parents, and then
yeah. There was also. Well, no, I think I'm satisfied. Well, I'm personally satisfied with how you answered. I think you framed it really well as, just to kind of give a wrap up of it, is that basically that there's a lot of noise online, and that's a particular population that's going to be very loud, but that doesn't mean that the thing that they're getting loud about isn't something that's happening. So that there could be two things that are true at the same time. I'm satisfied with that answer. What I put in before I went on that long ask was about conversion therapy, but it's along the same.
Yeah.
It's
that was the other
it's
thing,
the
that's
same.
right.
I think it's the same thing though. You're not
Same
seeing
principle.
that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have anything to add to it,
I
then,
would say on that note, the only thing I would say is just like, again, narrative. It's like, when you say conversion therapy, I instantly think it's like, well, what do you mean by that? Because if I say a gay person went to church, converted to Christianity, and said they weren't gay anymore, in layman's Christian terms, that just means, in Christianese, right? That's just deliverance, getting saved, or whatever, right? Church terms. To the world, that's conversion therapy. Like someone just deciding,
imposed, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
No, they weren't kind of coerced. They had a personal experience with, Jesus and religion and stuff like that. And the world would just say that's conversion therapy. That somehow they're coerced. It's the same thing where it's like, the left will say they're pro-choice, but if someone chooses life, they're traditional and are evil. But it's like, they chose life. So it seems like you're pro-choice of death, right? That's the only option. But like, you're not considering if you're pro-choice, why do you only talk about one choice? It's not
right.
It's like we talk about what's free will, but you only say you can only do one thing. That's not free will. Like you're forcing someone to consistently choose death, and you're creating a system that only enforces and not enforces, that encourages death. Is that actually pro-choice? So that's all I would say about that. It just, again, narrative. It's like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, and that's what you've just done there is really good example of your how epistemologically deep you go, and I think how you think about these things more below the surface with the semantics and the ontology, like really getting into the different twists and turns of, and this is why I love following your stuff, because I watched one of your videos. The first video I watched, embarrassing myself, I can't remember the topic, but I just remember you taking me on kind of like disentangling things and taking me on a journey a bit to understand these deeper questions, to think about the framework and how things are spun, and not in a coercive way, but in a way that's just asking you to really unwind the narrative with you. And so that's really great. And I really wish you luck with all of that, because I think it's going to be very successful. And I just want to say to the listeners, just a quick thing, your latest episode is on The View, and we don't have to go into it, but it's just comical because that show drives me nuts and I cannot wait to watch that. But so that's going to be interesting to see you disentangle that, But
the View is a source of a lot of
agita.
Yeah, or just it's like a gold mine for content. I feel like
I thought you said something else, Clay. Sorry.
Oh no. The View is it's a gold mine for content in terms of like, if you want to talk about what's going on, someone will say something on The View every now and again where you're like, all right, well that is a good thing to talk about. I mean, like when Coleman Hughes went on was really interesting.
I felt bad for him. Oh my God.
I don't know. He held himself pretty well. He's a big boy. He knows what he's doing.
I could just see the. I would need a Xanax. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that is a whole. I mean, and there's so much. We'll have to have you back on at some point, Mike, because there's so much to get into. With I would love to talk more about like abortion. I think is a very interesting topic. And I think the other thing you brought up, which was and now I'm drawing a blank. But there's a lot more that I'd like to ask you about. Oh yeah, just like The View, for instance, and just a lot more we could talk about. But there is one thing I'm really eager to get to, because I think, and we've been circling around it this whole conversation, right? Which is faith and Christianity, which is obviously a very big part of your life, and I think probably, from what it seems like, guides your thinking in a very profound way, which makes sense. I mean, that sort of is what you would expect, I suppose. And so I actually wanted to start off, I think an interesting place to start off is your Instagram, the racism app you were referring to earlier. You have 1 Corinthians 9:19, excuse me, 1 Corinthians chapter 9:19 through 23.
Mhm.
And I'm actually going to read that out loud.
Okay.
And I would like for you to go into why that you have that posted up in your bio and what it means to you, and we can kind of just go from there. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became like a Jew, to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. I will admit to you, that is the first time I have read a Bible verse, and I do not know how long. Because I am not particularly religious. I grew up religious. I went to church, found it wasn't for me, but I am very interested in, I think, your personal religious journey, and your thoughts on the topic more broadly, because I think there is something of a religious revival going on right now, a little bit, especially among young people. So I guess my first question is, why that quote, why that passage from 1 Corinthians?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the best verses to describe what true compassion and outreach actually looks like from a Christian perspective. Because Paul, who's the writer of this, he's not describing like, people who are like a chameleon, like they're fake, like they're people pleasers. They like, you like ice cream, they like ice cream, right? That's not what he's describing. He's describing like, no matter what level you're at, being able to like come down, go up, and like meeting people where they're at. So when he says all things to all people, Paul was the Jew of Jews, right? He was, he could, if you're talking about like on an intellectual understanding of the scriptures and who Christ is and Christianity, he could run circles around you all day, every day. But if he were talking to just a layman, just a regular person, he would just meet them where they're at and talk to that person on their level. He wouldn't like start opining and using, all these intellectual words, and you see this with like in like the online pseudo intellectual movement, where it's like you have these guys who go online and try to make them look like they know what they're talking about, but they don't know what they're talking about. It's also the difference between, like, I've been looking into a lot of Saxon versus Latinate words, and if you study like Abraham Lincoln, his speeches, Hemingway, it's like all these people, like when or even what's the prime minister from the UK during World War II?
Churchill.
Winston Churchill.
Right? His speeches, right? There's a reason why they used Saxon language, right? Saxon language is like the very simple, like the layman terms, right? Very short sentences to the point. Latinate is anything like anything with like a TION, like acquisition. Instead of saying acquisition, just say you got it, right?
Right, right.
So it's like it's using language, and language can be one aspect of meeting people where that, like talking to people like they're a human being, not some kind of means to a goal.
Yeah.
And that's how Paul was, right? Especially Paul, who he was a he was a Jew, he was a Roman citizen. He was a very unique person because he had ties to so many things, right? He was a Jew, but he predominantly gave the gospel to Gentiles. He he traveled, and if you look at the like just look up the Paul's travel map one day, and you'll see just everywhere he went to. So he's constantly interacting with different types of people, right? He's not only interacting with people in his hometown, he's interacting with people from different cultures, walks, ways of life, backgrounds. And when I look at our political landscape, or even just our culture, everyone just talks past each other. No one is concerned about actually it's one thing to say a lot of words. It's one thing to be popular. It's one thing to have a lot of knowledge. It's a completely different thing to when you speak, you're able to you're able to touch the hearts of men and really get them to connect with you. You know what I mean? It's like have you ever it's like when you run the jokes when people's like how easy it is for guys to make friends, right? It's like you meet another person. Some of my best friends are people where I've met and there's just a connection with them that's just there. And different walks of life, don't have the same upbringing, possibly different cultures, but for some reason there's just a heart connection with that person that's just been given. And I think when it's all things to all people, it's when I think of my friends, whatever they need me to be, I will be for them. Now that's not the same as giving into their delusions. It's what they need, not what they want, and being able to understand that. And a lot of times, when you have people or friends who are going through great hardship, what do they need from you? Not what do they want from you. They can be a crack addict and they want money from you to get more crack. I'm not gonna do that, right?
Yeah,
right.
I'm gonna be what you need me to be. I'm gonna be all things to all people. So I think a lot of the times it's sort of an art form to do, and I think there's a strong argument that this ability is unique to the Christian mind. And when I say Christian mind, I mean, if you grew up in America, there's just
So I'll pick up the thread here just a little bit, Mike, because this is a topic I find endlessly fascinating.
Yeah.
Which is, I think what you're getting at is, even if you're not Christian in the theological sense, you are Christian in a deeper. And Richard Dawkins said something like this and got pilloried for it, I think, by a lot of people, but I think he was spot on. In a cultural, philosophical sense, I'll say now, I'm an atheist, but I am a Christian philosophically and culturally in so many ways.
Yeah.
And in fact, Tom Holland, the historian, makes this argument very, very well in his book Dominion, which I highly recommend to people.
I have that book.
Just recommended that book to it's a great, if you haven't read it yet, pick it up and start reading it tonight. Super interesting. But also, I will say, I took a class on Islam at Columbia, and my Muslim professor made this same point. He goes, I'm a Christian Muslim because I believe, in the Quran and the teachings of Muhammad, but culturally and philosophically, I think in this Christian way, because the doctrines of Christianity were the sort of wellspring and the ultimate origin point of our liberal, and I use liberal in the more politically philosophical sense, not
natural
the
law
partisan sense, right? The more liberal philosophy that undergirds our entire society and our culture. Sorry for the tangent, but it is very interesting.
It's true, though.
And I think that's the point you're trying to make,
Yep.
Mike. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, no, you're around the nose. I think it's just the Christian ethos that's just ingrained in America. That's why there's a reason why. I mean, people argue that America is not a Christian nation, but go talk to someone in the Middle East, they'll all tell you America is a Christian nation, right? There's a reason why they're screaming death to America, right? It's because they see that America is a Christian nation. And even Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, they'll be militant atheists, but they want America to be Christian, right? They want, and there's a verse in the Bible that actually talks about this. It says, I'm actually blanking on the verse. I'll send it later. But it basically kind of talks, it talks on the sense of people who desire Christianity or desire the power, they desire God, but without its power. They don't want the relationship with Christ. They don't want the relationship with God, but they want the ethics of Christianity.
Right.
Which is a very interesting take. But with, this verse specifically at the end, Paul is saying, I become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessings. So Paul is doing it because there's a purpose, right? There's, at the end of the day, there's ultimate purpose for your life. There's ultimate purpose for your soul. Your soul's going to go somewhere, whether you like it or not. And the reality is, it's like, if you're a Christian, there is a stewardship in how you treat people. And I do think there is an aspect of Christianity, of Christians who think that their job is to like evangelize people. There is a concept of evangelism. I do think the concept is flawed in a way. Scripture does not describe when it comes to evangelism. The Bible describes me as a Christian as a sower, like I sow a seed and I water, but the Bible does not describe me as a harvester. It's not my job to harvest you into the kingdom of God. That's God's job. My job is to, like, this conversation in Christianese terms is sowing a seed. In Christianese terms, it's watering. But I can't force you to be a Christian. I can't, like that. I do not have the position of harvesting your soul. So
that sounds kind of badass, though, I will say, harvesting
right?
myself.
But that's a God thing. So that's why it's like to become all things to all people, right? I'm a Christian and I'm talking to an atheist and a gay man, right? And we're able to have a civil conversation and to talk and to relate and be human and laugh and, opine, philosophize, right? That falls into that lane of becoming all things to all people. I'm not bending my will to your beliefs and saying, I'm not, like, there are some people who probably have like weird wonky theology who would say me talking to you guys is like, compromising my faith, but it's not.
Well,
right?
That's where psychology comes in. We're not going to go down there. That's for another episode.
Yeah,
but that's a very odd kind of person.
Like you're DMing me and saying, hey, you want to come on a podcast? Yeah, we can talk. Like that's not a big deal.
Right.
And wherever your journey with God ends up, my only job, my only contribution is just being a light, being salt and light, not being afraid to give my opinions and give my take and my biblical perspective. But I can't strong arm you into the kingdom of God, and because
it's about what you believe in your heart, right? Like, I can't say the words I believe in Christ and then just get in if it's not in here. Do you think that? I'm curious, actually. Do you think that's a good take?
I mean, this, we can have a whole podcast episode on this alone.
I don't. Maybe this is down too much in the
Christianity, and this is what I was trying to say to Zander, is that I do think there's a lot of people who have a misunderstanding of what Christianity even is about, and there's a little bit of a renaissance happening in the Christian world. Even now, between like Protestants, Catholics, and Eastern Orthodox, about how we view, a little bit of like a deconstruction of how we view construction mixed with a renaissance of how we view scripture, how we view church. And it's a little bit of a beautiful thing because there's a lot of like coming back to the heart of Christianity in a lot of ways, specifically in Gen Z, a little bit of millennials, and a lot of new Christians coming in, because a lot of people think Christianity is about good guys and bad guys. They think there's good guys, there's bad guys. The bad guys go to hell, the good guys go to heaven. That's not what Christianity is. Christianity is, we're all bad guys. There are no good guys. We're all on our way to hell. There's only one good guy. His name is Jesus, and he came to create a way for us not to go to hell, despite still being bad guys. So it's like, Jesus died for the oppressed, but he also died for the oppressor. That is very different than any other religion. So it's like, if I say Jesus died for the oppressor, right? People would be like, what do you mean? What do you mean? No, he came to set the captives free. Jesus was a nice guy. He was homeless, and like we have all these depictions of who Jesus is. It's like, no, Jesus died for the oppressor. And guess what? We're all the oppressors.
Yeah. Well, we're all sinners. We all, I mean, and
Yeah.
even as an atheist, I would agree with this. I mean, there's a commonality in our belief about human nature in which everyone is flawed. Everyone has some sort of evil, for lack of a better term, within them to some capacity. Maybe there's derivations. I'm certainly not Ted Bundy, but I am evil in some ways, as all men are.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
yeah. And it's
Yeah.
also a
We're
lot
all
of it
flawed. Yep.
is how there's a very strong intellectual premise of Christianity. And if you read the words of Jesus, you'll see, and a lot of times, like, it's funny when people argue the Bible, they're like, oh, you're playing semantics. It's like, yeah, like the Bible is a game of semantics. Like, words matter. There's a reason why very specific words are said in very specific instances. And that just goes to, reading literacy. At the end of the day, like, a lot of misconceptions come down to reading literacy.
That's
Like,
right.
literacy rates are very low. Am I saying people are stupid? Yes. Like, people are, the literacy rates are really
I will
low.
say,
So when you look,
that's not that. I will say briefly that is the fault of a program of teaching reading in a certain way.
Yeah.
That was whole world. It's a whole other subject, but like we really screwed a whole generation of kids,
no,
especially underprivileged kids.
Absolutely.
Continue.
But
Yeah.
so just my final point is that Christianity is all about, like, how you think. Predominantly is how you think. So when you mention, like, oh, what you believe in your heart, when the Bible talks about the heart, the word in Hebrew is actually the mind. So it's like, but the reading literacy rates, right? The typical person would read, believe in your heart and you will be saved. Their thinking is like, oh, like a feeling, like in your heart. It's like the saying, like, how you love someone. It's like a feeling. It's like, no, the Bible's saying you need to rationalize in your mind that Jesus is God. That's what the Bible is actually saying. So, and that's why even Scripture says, have a renewing of your mind. Like, why doesn't it say have a renewing of your heart? It says have a renewing of your mind.
And there's a through line from the beginning, Adam and Eve, where you have the impulse and then the conscious awareness of sin. And we can totally do this again, because I want to talk to you so much about the social gospel movement, how the left infused Marxism in Christianity. I want to talk to you so much about all these different things, and I think we should definitely have you back.
Down to nerd out and have conversation.
We will have to do a part 2. I really very, very quickly want to hit on one thing, which is this idea of America being a Christian nation. And I think if we do have a part 2, I think we should maybe debate for, if I can use that word, a little bit, because I think there's a way in which that is very true and there's a way in which it's not true at all. And I think because America as a Christian nation is actually a statement that can be interpreted fairly in many different ways. It's a majority Christian nation. It's been historically majority Christian. It's, but at the same time, Christianity has never been the official, codified religion. It is a very diverse. We are now, especially now, very diverse religiously. There's a lot of non-believers. We have Hindus and Muslims to some degree, and Buddhists and all these things. And yet, America is a very Christian nation in the sense that philosophically, even those, as my, Islamic professor, my Muslim professor pointed out, there's a way in which those other religions are Christian Muslims and Christian Hindus in a certain sense. Like, it's actually an extremely deep and interesting topic that we cannot cover in any kind of brevity. But I think it's very interesting because it's like, is America a Christian nation? Yes and no.
So it's like yes, Ed, maybe no, not really, but yeah,
no, but also yes, but maybe no.
It's like,
but I would love it would be great to we do need to do, because I actually went on a whole spiral on my Instagram about this today. And I've been getting messages for and against what I was saying, and brought in some political theory and whatnot. Let's plan on it, because I think this is a very rich discussion that I think we can disentangle together, all three of us.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it sounds like we're winding down here. And I'll ask one last very, very quick question. Maybe it's too long. Maybe we'll save it for part 2. But what do you think about this apparent revival of Christianity? What do you think is the source of that? And I think you said something earlier that kind of gets at what I think you might say, which is that was it something like all people, all men being all people, I guess, desire God in their heart to some degree, or have this knowledge of him or desire of him. You said something akin to that, and I'm forgetting, I'm doing a bad job of remembering the exact quote, but do you think there is something with the youths a desire for meaning that is behind this. Because, for example, we have a good friend, Anthony and I, who's supposed to be on the podcast. She had to drop out a while back, but who kind of reconverted to Catholicism. And I
She
think
converted
for her,
to Catholicism.
she converted. I don't know if she was originally Catholic, but she had this religious awakening. And I think for her, a lot of it was meaning and connection. And I'm wondering if you pin that as the source of the, maybe this is a bit of a leading question, I'm sorry, but if you pin that as the source
I
of
kind
this
of
increase.
understand what you're asking. I think obviously, generally speaking, I think all humans desire meaning in their life, right? Meaning and purpose. At the end of the day, that's what life is about, right? And if you kind of study Genesis, the fall of man, what was robbed from us was our purpose, was our meaning, which is directly tied to our relationship and connection with God. This resurgence and growth of Christianity, specifically right now, is more so very pocketed in like Gen Z and like an active. It's a reactive decision on the radical left and what we've seen in politics, especially coming out of COVID. COVID was a very dark time for a lot of people. Just isolation, people's graduations were robbed from them, birthdays were robbed from them, marriages destroyed, suicide rates, at high rates, right? So we're seeing this as a result of very dark times, what people consider very dark times, and desiring something that is more, that it will provide them some type of community and stuff like that. Now, the dangers of this is, because people coming from someone who's like in the Christian space, in the Christian world, evangelism has always been a thing. These evangelistic crusades have always been a thing. Mass conversions to Christ has always been a thing. The issue that the church in America has consistently seen is how much of those conversions are actually real.
Yeah, that's a good point. Very good.
Because I do think people can seek out stuff and people can be drawn into different movements and they can be something for years. But just because, there's old age analogy, is like you can stand in a garage for 5 years, does not make you a car. And that happens a lot in Christianity. It happens a lot in Christianity, where people will sit in churches for years and think they're Christian. So all of this kind of goes into, future podcasts where we talk about all of this, where it's like, there is a specific state of mind that is exclusive to Christianity that a lot of people fail to kind of grasp. And I think it was the same case with Zander when I asked him, what is a Christian? And he said, a Christian is someone who's loving. And I said, what does it mean to love? And his definition of love was basically, to love means to affirm other people's delusions. So it's so how could you, so that's not Christianity. So his definition of Christianity is historically not Christianity. Because Christianity is actually not defined by it's not defined by love. That's not what Christianity.
I would say it's certainly a feature.
It's a feature. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a calling. It's a call to action. But Christianity isn't actually defined by the capacity in which we love. It's used to identify, and it's a feature. But then also your definition of love is fundamentally different. Your definition of love is to affirm people's delusions. That's not love.
Right.
Right.
So, then it becomes a bug and not a feature.
Toxic empathy.
Yeah. So like there's a lot of people who, if you say you're a Christian, I want to know in what framework have you determined that? And there's a lot of people who, and this isn't like a bag. You can convert to Catholicism, you can convert to Eastern Orthodox, you can be Protestant. Me personally, I don't really care. I have friends who are Catholics. I have friends who are Eastern Orthodox. There's a lot of Theo bros and Ortho bros who debate on X about the one true church and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, there is a very specific ethos to Christianity and understanding of what it means to be a Christian that is just universal. And if you do not have that framework, because like I was saying, the Bible says have a renewing of your mind. When Jesus, if you read the Beatitudes, right? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall see the kingdom of God. What does it mean to be poor in spirit? Like, when you think of that, again, semantics, we're playing a semantics game. So it's like when the Bible says, why did Jesus say, blessed are the poor in spirit? What does it mean to be poor in spirit? He's just talking about, like, in a lot of ways, kind of like how Socrates was like, I don't know anything, right? I don't know anything.
That's right. That's
kind of, that falls in line when Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall see the kingdom of God. Because the Pharisees were not poor in spirit. They knew everything. They had it all down. And Jesus said, Jesus said, those who aren't sick don't need a physician. I've come to those who are sick. So if you don't think you're sick, if you don't think there's anything wrong with you, you'll never see a doctor. And one of Jesus's monikers is the great physician, right? He wasn't, was he an actual doctor? No. but there's a reason why
he did literally heal people, though, to be fair.
No, he did literally heal people, but he healed and ministered to people who believed that they needed help, right? And this is like textbooks, like psychology, right? If you're like a drug addict or you're an alcoholic, like what is like the first thing they try to get you to like do? Like it's like you need to admit there's something wrong with you, right?
Admission, right.
So again, that's all in your head. That's all thought process,
right? It's so interesting. I'll end. This is just something I'm noticing because I haven't thought theologically in a long time, and this is why I find this conversation so interesting and your perspective so interesting, Mike, is that I'm noticing this through line in how you think about Christianity, which is the Garden of Eden. We have this innate relationship with God, and then Eve bites the apple, Adam bites into the fruit of knowledge, right? Fruit from the tree of knowledge. They gain this ability to know. And so it's the knowing that is important. You have to rationalize Christ. You have to you can't just feel it. You have to know and understand it because you now have that. It's like going back to Spider-Man. You quoted Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. Now that you have the power to know, you have the responsibility to know it, to rationalize God. And then connecting this to the rest of our conversation, or the big part of it, this idea of rationality, thinking, reasoning through things, a cornerstone of Western culture, of Christian philosophy, which goes into what we were talking about earlier about I'm an atheist, but in a sense, my inheritance philosophically and culturally, and thus my understanding of the world is in some sense Christian. And I think that's just, it ties a bow. There's this nice kind of not circular logic, that's the wrong thing to say, but this nice connection, this nice through line of everything that you've been talking about, Mike. I find it so interesting, and it's making the gears turn, and definitely want to have you back on because I think we should absolutely get deeper into theology and history of Christianity and how it does affect and has affected our culture and who we are. I think I would really like to talk about abortion. I think that's a very interesting subject, and I think we will disagree, but in a good and civil way. I'm curious to know more. So we'll have to have you back.
I'd love to talk about homosexuality too.
Homosexuality, yeah.
And I think this is this is what I keep on saying. I think this would be a rich platform moment for us to actually have the three of us, like you said, a Christian, an atheist, and a homosexual going into a bar.
Christian, an atheist, and a gay guy walk into a podcast.
Well,
that's the
it's
setup.
A good example of what America looks like to a large degree now, and I think let's do it. Yeah. So,
thanks for coming on, Mike. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.